Hey, hey, welcome everyone. Gonna give everyone a few minutes to roll in. Hope you're doing well tonight. Rachel, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I made it. I made it to the end of the day.
Yes,
Sometimes it's just one day at a time.
that's how you gotta go about it.
Yeah,
Today was
for
a
real.
day. Today was definitely a day, but we're here now. We're here.
We are. We have a little bit of a short week this week too, because Veterans Day is on Thursday. So we got that off for the company.
I forgot about that.
I did too, actually, until I looked at my calendar and then I was like, oh yeah. But I also have some friends in town this weekend, so I'm gonna show them around Nashville. They've never been.
Very nice. Nashville is one of my favorite cities.
So fun. I love it.
It's a
I love
hidden
it here.
gem.
Truly, totally is.
All right, gonna give everyone a few more minutes to jump in before we get started. I'm really excited about this session. I think more so than all the other ones. But I'm excited about all of them actually. All right. Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. If that makes sense for you, Rachel. You're good with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's roll. I'm sure people will
Awesome.
keep trickling in.
Well, welcome everyone to the next session of In Session, presented by Visionary Rising and Wethos. This session is going to explore the Wethos toolkit every studio owner needs. Whether you're a solopreneur or leading a team of many, like myself now, our approach is to utilize the Wethos platform to co-anchor and jump on in. So I'm Leticia, the CEO and founder of Visionary Rising Agency. I own the creative studio and production studio, and we craft authentic campaigns. We've been around since 2016, but have really kind of hit our stride in the last 18 months, thanks in part to our relationship and partnership utilizing the Wethos platform. And so we came together with Wethos to present this series as really a means to kind of walk you through the processes and systems that have worked for us in utilizing the platform, but then also to provide a really great community of studio owners and freelancers who are also kind of going through the same exploration as you are. And then without further ado, Rachel.
Yeah, hey y'all. So I'm Rachel Rennick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wethos. I actually used to be an art director. So I used to work at a few big ad agencies in New York. I shot commercials. I did a lot of social and digital campaigns for big brands like CoverGirl and Hershey's. It's actually where I also met my co-founder, Claire. We actually left advertising a few years ago to start our own studio. And we found out very quickly just how hard it is to scale a service-based business up. We were working across tons of different nonprofit clients specifically, and the business was growing really fast. We did about 1.4 million in revenue in about 18 months. So we actually invested in building out our own internal platform and software, which is now known as Virtual Studios. So that is just about the same stuff that you all use today. All of the scopes and services that you leverage on the platform also started with real data from our own studio. So we're super excited about the session today. And, we've definitely lived the pain of scaling service-based business up ourselves. So we're really happy to have y'all. And thanks for giving our product a shot.
Awesome. So one of the things that I really love about the Wethos Virtual Studios is that it was built by creative entrepreneurs and for creative entrepreneurs who are building and scaling their business. And so in the first lesson of the series, this is a 6-part series. We're on session 3. In the first lesson, I really went over kind of our origin story as an agency owner in discovering the Wethos platform as a part of their 100 studio user cohort. So when we were invited to be a part of that program last year, we were going through kind of a few different things for our business, right? One, because of the pandemic, a lot of our partners had halted their contracts to wait out the pandemic. We were dealing with high cost of doing business and lower profit margins, and then also uncertainty around runway and capital as a result of kind of all of these market trends that we really didn't have any control over. And then as a result of kind of one and two, we then had an inability to meet demands for our projects due to low skilled workforce, or sometimes if you can't pay people, they're not showing up, right? And then not to mention, we also were managing teams across multiple projects, platforms, and payment systems. I think at one point, I working with my operations manager, we were working across at least 7 or 8 platforms, and I was exhausted. But we were able to scale by using the Wethos platform exactly as it was intended, right? Pricing proposals, finding new collaborators, managing budget, and timelines. And so the first session of this series really focused on how we were able to price our proposals, and what that process looked like and how we were able to increase. And then tonight, we're really going to focus on kind of the managing budget and the timeline expectation for projects. And so the first thing that I want to say is that once we implemented the Wethos platform, our pitch time decreased from 2 weeks to 3 days. This is like one of my favorite things to share, because as a solo founder, and many of you on this call tonight are also solo founders, you know that you're everything at your business. You're writing the proposals, you're taking the leads, you're the account manager, you're everything. And as a result, right, some of the operational aspects of the business, things that keep it going, that kind of happens at the end. And so as a result of that, it was taking me 2 or 3 weeks to kind of get into the headspace to actually create the proposal or create the scope for projects with people who were actually wanting to work with us. And our win rate also increased, right? I know everyone likes numbers. So we're 88% when scoped via Wethos. I haven't updated this since the start, but we have a few more wins in there as well. So I think that we're probably closer to around 90-91% for the year so far. And so in lesson 2, I shared how our process for building the services library, and really focused on 3 core areas. As Rachel said, the services library really started in her agency, in their agency, sourced by creators. And so it's a comprehensive list of services with rates that have been sourced by creators and studio owners. And how our team used it is that we really kind of looked at 3 areas: the current services, complementary services, and then the expansion services. And really use that tier system to grow out our own services library, utilizing also what was already pre-added by the Wethos team. And so we added in our existing services, then selected services that matched from the Wethos library, and discovered that there were a lot of things we weren't charging for, but should have been. And I think that the first time that you go through the system, you'll probably see that as well, because I had a moment of like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? And so that's kind of when we expanded and created the land and expand methodology. And so through identifying that we were leaving a lot of services on the table or not offering them, we're able to kind of identify that we didn't want to be an agency that people came to for one thing. We wanted to be the agency that people came to for everything. And so in thinking through that, how do we do that? For us, it's not just about landing the project, it's about landing the client, right? And so our ethos is to really land them first, bundle our services, and then expand the relationship. So if someone comes to us for just a website design, but we have copywriting and we have production and photography that we complete in-house or we contract out, they don't have to look at multiple different places to figure out how they're going to create the content for this website. They're able to come to us, we pitch them, we expand the services, and then we grow as they grow. And so we also tie our discovery process really into every step of that. It's not just really looking at, well, what does the client want, we're also examining what do they need and what are they trying to say, right? As an agency owner, it's really incumbent upon us when people come to us to kind of read between the lines and be able to identify the things that they need before they know that they need them. And so that was part one and two, right? Tonight's session, which is part three of the entire series, but part two of our our pricing strategy sessions, it's really going to break down everything that you need to know as a studio owner to really scale by managing your budget and client expectations in tandem. And so we really want to take you through kind of our process and then answer questions as we go through. So the main thing that we've moved to as an agency, I think that has made the biggest difference is that our team works in project pods, which allows us to quickly operationalize teams and projects for our clients to ensure that they're receiving the best service and that they're getting the support that they need as they grow. We focus on high growth startups, and so a lot of times clients are coming to us with very small teams, 9 to 10, and growing their business. And there's a lot of things that are uncertain. However, we want them to know that they can be certain in us. And so for us, this process works because it ensures that each of our team members is really assigned based on their area of expertise. And then we're also able to minimize burnout and scope creep across the projects while also limiting cost. And so part of like being a studio owner is really managing your team and managing to minimize burnout. And when you think about batch working, the reason that the pod structure works is that a person who's doing 1 to 2 tasks across 6 projects, but those are the only tasks that they're responsible for doing, they're going to be more efficient and more effective because their brain isn't having to constantly jump back and forth between multiple things. And so because they're only responsible for this part of the project, they're able to work to do more and more effectively, which then enthuses them to keep doing the work. And then for scope creep, it really enables us to provide the client a detailed explanation of what they can expect for each team member in each role so that they're not going to our designer asking for account management updates when that's kind of not their responsibility. And so how the pod system works is that each team member is assigned an area of focus and then paired with other team members to handle various areas of the account work. And so website project pod, this is pulled from the Wethos template scope for website development and design. And as you can see, kind of breaks down the content strategist, the UX UI designer, and the CMS developer. Well, our team took that structure and then identified, well, hey, every website project that comes through our door needs to have this team pod already associated because that's what the Wethos platform says, and that's what we need. Realistically, you shouldn't have a designer also doing the development. You can, but it may not be the best, right? And then another thing that our team started doing for every client and for every project is we also add on an account services team member cost that's baked into the overall project. And what that does is that even if this person only works 2 to 3 hours per week, and their only responsibility is to respond to the client, coordinate with the team to provide client updates, that 2 to 3 hours that person is working is 2 to 3 hours back to the other team members who don't have to stop their work in order to jump in and answer a client email or provide a client with an update. And so our best practices, right, in order to kind of build this structure and build this strategy was to really start from scratch and outline the practices and processes beforehand. So because we've grown from a solo studio working out of a spare bedroom where I did everything to a team atmosphere where now I only come in on projects that I really love and kind of oversee the entire operations. This has been made possible because of our SOPs, or our standard operating procedures. which we then break out across kind of three different areas, right? It's looking at methodology, our onboarding process, and then our project setup. And the reason that you really focus on methodology and why I said it there is because I wanted to empower my team to make decisions as how I would, even if I wasn't there. And so this SOP kind of really outlines our entire scoping process, how I go about identifying whether or not a client, whether we should scope a project, what it looks like, how I respond to emails and communication, and then the overall contract and signing process, right? This piece is very, very detailed because maybe you want to go on vacation and you don't want to be interrupted on vacation to sign a contract when there may be someone else who can. And then really walking through our onboarding process, and the biggest piece of the puzzle really through that onboarding process, because our scope and our pitch process is so smooth, you don't want clients to go through a really smooth pitch process, love everything that you do, and then jump into the onboarding process and kind of ruin that magic, because then that client interaction, kind of all of the goodwill that you've gained through the client pitch process is kind of lost in translation. And so there we really focused on our agency contact structure. Who do you need to reach out to for what? And whether it's the account manager or the UX designer, and then service level agreements. When you reach out, what is the level of expectation that you can expect to receive across our team? Is it via Slack within 2 hours? If it's via email, give us a little time. Wherever possible, I try to limit interactions via cell phone. It's not someplace that I can track. It's not someplace that other people track. And right now I have 100 unread text messages. If you text me anything, I feel sorry for you. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. And then what we always include as well is how you access your client portal, and then I document how to build milestone updates for our clients. And the reason that I kind of took that approach to building it out is because I started as a solo founder. Clients come here because they love working with me and they want to continue working with me. The reality is that as the agency grows, in order for us to be successful, I can't always be involved in every single interaction. However, I didn't want the magic to be lost between them being handed over to an account manager or an account services individual and them expecting to contact and interact with me. And then the project setup is also very key, because it outlines if the client will have access to a central location to look at their or if they can expect to receive it via email. It also outlines the level of interaction to expect from our team. Are we checking in weekly? Are we going to be checking in every 2 weeks? And then outlines the meeting expectations. Because my background is more in a corporate structure in agencies and tech companies, I really took that approach and to meetings into my own organization. When I worked for a large agency, we had set times when the client expected to meet with us. If we received kind of escalations and things during that time frame, there was no expectation for our team to meet or for the entire team to convene, because the client knew up front that they were going to meet with us either on Wednesday of that week or Friday of that week. So most of the time they were just lifting up an email to say, hey, let's talk about this in our meeting. And so setting that information from the start and those rules of engagement really helps to manage and maintain how you work with your clients and how you can give your team the space that they need to be successful and build and grow projects. And so our process as a whole is really kind of starting at that first part, which is identifying the scope process, right? Is first thing that we do is we go and we search through the template library to identify if there is already a template that meets our team needs, or if we'll have to modify our own. Of all of the pitches that we've created, I think that we've only ever had to create one from scratch. And that was actually just us combining a bunch of different Wethos templates together. And then kind of creating the scope and sending it out. And then once we have completed the step one, we then go about creating the scope, which includes specific call outs to things that the client mentioned during our discovery process. As I mentioned earlier, it's really about kind of tying and threading in your discovery process throughout the entire interaction with the client so that they know that you listened to them, that you heard them, and that you're actually creating solutions for them and providing value. And then from there, we assign out the pod. And so Wethos' template and services library already does that work for you by outlining the team member needed to complete the team, right? And so from there, all you need to do is just assign the pod from your existing network or source utilizing the collaboration tool. And so the final kind of course in this session really goes into more in depth about how we've been able to build out our creator collective utilizing the collaboration tool through Wethos, and then also how we've been able to actually also source projects because the people that we used from there came back to us and brought us in on projects as well. And so kind of once you've gone through the hard parts of really establishing the rules of engagement, the agency side stakeholders, and introducing those to the clients, then it's very much easier to utilize the Wethos' services library to scope out your project. And then I will stop there and open it up for questions.
So we'll let folks throw some, if y'all have questions you want to throw them in the chat, that totally works for us. But while people are thinking, I was curious, Leticia, so when you're talking to your clients and getting them comfortable with like a new point of contact, we always ran into this when we were running our own agency, and it was like, it's sort of this trick of like, how do you transfer that trust? I'm curious, like, how do you get somebody comfortable with a new point of contact on your team? And then do you sort of hint at it, or I guess set expectations with them up front if you're the one that's doing the sale, that you yourself may not be directly on the team? And I caveat this question by saying, I've been at a lot of big agencies, and every big agency will give you the chief creative officer to pitch, and then you'll never see that guy again. So this is actually very normal behavior inside of an agency, but maybe it's a little bit less apparent. But yeah, I was curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so for newer clients, I do set that expectation kind of upfront. The way that our process works now is I really come in kind of on the last part of the conversation. And that's allowing whoever that lead is going to be to really establish that trust up front with the client, and then kind of build on from there. And I'm more of just a, hey, welcome. This is the level of trust that you'll get in working with our agency for our newer clients. For our older clients, the way that what's been really working well for us is whoever I've kind of identified as the new contact person will actually kind of come onto the account and shadow with me over a month or two so that the client gets used to seeing their face, gets used to seeing their name, responding to them. So then when we do that transition, it's not a, oh my goodness, who is this person? It's more of a kind of a natural and organic space because we kind of have it tiered. You know, week one, I'll introduce you to the team. Week two, you'll join the meetings. And then by month one, end of month one, my expectation is that now you're leading these meetings. Now you're responding to the client interactions. If I receive an email, I'm CCing you so that you can respond, right? And kind of building that trust and helping them to build that trust as well. It's been kind of hard for me because I'm so used to doing everything to kind of take that step back and allow my team to kind of answer because I'm so used to being able to provide the answer very quickly. And I have to remind myself, nope, let them build the trust, let them let them deliver that question. And so that's kind of what's really been working for us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's funny in a way, like you're training people on your side, but also, you know, you're training the client, right? And their own like behavior and expectations. So like I always find that when we were going through this, like, and the client would keep emailing me directly, for instance, and we were trying to like sort of make the transition of giving them a new point of contact or like a team lead, just keeping looping that person in, keep CCing them, like, you know, it's what's that phrase, like monkey see monkey do, like they'll, you know, you
Mm-hmm.
sort of train them to get used to who their new point of contact is, as long as like you continue to stay consistent with that.
Mm-hmm.
um I had a money question, which, you know, right now we're working on some features around profit margins and markups. And I was curious, in terms of like budget breakdown versus like client breakdown, you know, how you think about sort of transparency with the client, with the team members, like what, you know, in terms of revealing different pieces of the pie, or if you are marking up at all, like how do you kind of frame that, or rather, I don't know, not frame it if that is the case, from a margin perspective?
So, trust and transparency is actually one of our core values as an agency. And so, my perspective is always to lead with transparency for the team and for the clients, because that builds trust. And so, our clients know what it costs us to deliver a project, and they also know kind of our agency administrative fee, and what that includes and what that is inclusive of. And so, that amount actually does include kind of our markup amounts. And so I've never had a client push back and say, why are you charging this, or why are you adding this on? Because it's very clear in terms of what that looks like for them and what that amount is. And so whatever our markup is, we actually add that as a separate line item into the SOWs, so that they can also see, right? This is what it costs us to deliver the goods to you. And then this is what you're actually paying us for access to the agency. And then the team as well, because I think it's really, really important for them to know up front what it is that they are contributing to and how.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, even with the markups padded in there, like if you were working at any of your old agencies or companies currently, your time would be way more expensive if they were going through them than it is at cost here. So like that's always what we were like.
Never see any of that. So
Yeah, right. So like they're getting access to that incredible talent, that is probably, you know, at a better budget for them, and it's putting more money directly into y'all's pockets, which is always great. A few questions here in the chat. How do you mark up a project and make sure you're getting paid a fair portion? Which is a great question. And markup also, and if you're providing any services yourself, you know, I don't know if there's a markup within those as well.
yeah, so our markup process, we do it by project as a team. And depending on the project, depends on the markup. And so we also kind of tiered it at a revenue perspective. So
Mm,
it's gated by the client's revenue bookings commitment, basically. So if a client comes to us for a 10K project, right? That markup is going to look different than if a client came to us for a 25K markup or 25K
sure.
project. And so, but it's kind of determined based on what it is and how our team is delivering it. Couple of things that I always know going in is how much it's going to cost the project pod to create the project itself.
Hmm.
And then from there, we add on our agency fee for delivery of services. And so I've seen kind of it done a lot of different ways, but it's really worked for us to kind of treat the agency as a fifth person on the project,
Mm.
that is also supposed to be paid. So that ensures that, one, everything is fair for the freelancers and contractors and team members who work with us, but it also ensures that we have what we need to continue to operate as an agency.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of the sliding scale, is it a fixed like percentage, and then basically based on the total amount of the scope, the actual dollar amount that you take home changes, or do you also slide
Yes.
the percentage scale as well?
We slide the percentage scale as well. So the percentage scale is a range. gate it by level of investment.
Okay.
And so the higher the level of investment, the lower our markup.
Got it.
And because like when it kind of evens out when you look
Yeah.
at it as a whole. But that's how our process has worked.
Yeah, we're gonna start gathering more and more data about this, but just so folks are aware, we've seen markups typically anywhere from 10% all the way up to 30, 40%. We've found that most of the time, if you mark something up, I don't know, 20 or 25%, at the end of the day, you'll actually maybe take home like more like a 10 or 15% markup, with all the sort of unforeseen things that happen. So for us at least, like it's always better to err on that side of things, just because you never know what's going to happen, and have a little bit of padding there just in case. But that, from what we understand from like a data perspective, people end up netting out somewhere around 10 or 15% in terms of profit margin. But we're hoping next year to really be able to publish a much more robust set of data around that specifically too.
Yeah. And that's really in line with our rates as well, and that around that 10 to 25% range. And again, that just ensures that your team is getting paid their worth, but you also have the resources that you need in order to continue operating as a for-profit business.
Totally.
Which is key. Key.
Because that is how service-based businesses make money. Like you have to mark up. There is no other margin otherwise. So it's like people tend to be kind of weird about that, but it's just like that is literally how you. I think agencies also sort of shrouded this in mystery a lot on purpose. So Dan has a quick question in the chat. Curious to hear about your inbound lead generation. Oh, funny, I was just talking to somebody about this earlier today. And vetting clients. So how do you know if a potential client, can even afford the rates that you might put forward? Do you ask any like budgeting questions? Do you throw a proposal together and send that over at the beginning, towards the end? Like, how do you sort of balance time commitment to do that kind of thing versus getting a gut check on budget?
So one of our first steps, regardless of how the client comes in, is that they do have to fill out our discovery questionnaire in order to be booked with a team member. On that discovery questionnaire that they fill out prior to the meeting, there is a question on there about budget. And the question specifically says, what is the amount that you're willing to pay, not the amount that you have budgeted. Because people answer that question differently.
I bet.
Because we've had people who say, hey, I only have 5K, but I'm willing to pay 10K. Right? If they're willing to pay 10K, we can take the 5K up front. I know that we'll eventually get that 10K, right? So that kind of lets us know, and that gates it as well. And then during the discovery process, as we're walking through, our team kind of already has a clear understanding going into the call what the proposal or scope may be. And so we can actually talk through the client on that call, what we're thinking, and start discussing numbers on that call to see if it aligns. One of the things that I always say is you cannot be afraid to ask for the number. My favorite saying is you don't get your worth, you get what you negotiate. And so you have to constantly be advocating and negotiating for yourself as a freelancer as well as a studio owner. And when I'm walking through discussions or negotiations, I'm not just negotiating for me, I'm also negotiating for my team. And so that adds a level of kind of discussion to the numbers conversation, because at the end of the day, I have to be able to pay my team. Even if the agency doesn't make a lot of money off of the project, I want to at least be able to pay my team a fair rate. So that's key.
Yeah, we actually we threw a little like Instagram carousel together a while back, which I threw in the chat, which is how to ask about budget without asking about budget. So these are just some things that we found in sales really helped us kind of uncover a few things, like what types of resources do you have allocated to the initiative? Have you done anything like this in the past? Can help you figure out like how much maybe they have or haven't spent in the past, if they'll even tell you like other vendors maybe they've worked with. We also found that asking about key stakeholders could give us a sense, like if the stakeholders themselves are more senior in the organization, sometimes there is a larger budget allocated to that because the initiative is higher priority. And then just getting an understanding of like what would happen if they don't actually move forward and tackle the initiative. It just gives you a good sense too of like the level of urgency and priority of what they're actually reaching out to you for, because nothing is more annoying than when somebody reaches out, you put together a whole freaking proposal, and then really they were just like basically looking for a general quote because they're not really intending to actually do anything right now, but maybe they will someday in the future. And so it's just like, okay. So yeah, that's always good too. Like in that initial call, just we always like to get a sense because that usually comes out in the wash when you ask them, is like, what would happen if you didn't do this? And then they say, oh, well, actually, we weren't really thinking about doing it until next quarter.
Yeah.
So yeah,
your BSO meter gets really high after doing a couple calls, where it's like I'm at the point now where like probably 10 to 15 minutes into the call, I know whether or not the person really has the budget, or if they're just doing a general inquiry to see. Over the last couple of months, we've had a lot of inquiries from people who are looking to make the jump and leave their agencies, but they kind of want it to be courted, but they were 6 months off from making the decision. But they wanted to know what our process was. And, so kind of going around in that circle will let you know very quickly who has the budget and who doesn't. And then also for me, I'm definitely more of I love doing conference calls, video calls, preferably because I can read body language. And I can tell on the call, as I'm going through the process, if someone gets uncomfortable when I bring up the budgetary number, that means that they probably either can't afford our services or don't really have the budget. Because people who are in decision-making positions expect the ask. They expect the number to be mentioned. They expect that question. So if they get nervous on a call, 9 times out of 10, they either can't make the decision or they don't have the money to pay you what you're worth.
It's a really, really good call out. That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely a flag in that in terms of like decision-making power and budget power, I would say. There was a question, well, sort of a follow-up question to the markups, and we've heard this before too, especially for people who are solo. Going from like a solo studio owner to building out the small team, and then being that like creative director person who sort of oversees the role. Curious if you had any thoughts about, I don't know, how to think about what to pay yourself and whether or not that, I guess comes out of the margin, whether you actually lay out some services around creative direction or account direction, whatever, strategic direction, that kind of thing. Like, how do you think about paying yourself versus the other team members?
That's a really good question. I can tell you what not to do. Don't pay yourself. Make sure that you pay yourself. And so for me, that agency markup, that agency percentage, right? That's a combination of two things. It's a combination of what does it cost us to run the business? What does it cost me to run the business? Email, Gmail, all of the services and tools and everything that we have on a monthly basis. Plus, right, what would it cost me or what will I make from this project? You have to consider both so that you can ensure that you have the resources that you need to continue running your business and being effective, and also that you can be stress-free because you're paying yourself a fair wage. Right? Growing into the role of a studio founder and creative director versus someone that was kind of on the day-to-day was probably the hardest thing that I did because it was a mindset shift. It took me a very long time to pay myself because I wanted to make sure that everyone had things. At the end of the day, I didn't have anything. And so it was very hard to kind of keep the business going. And so once I shifted that mindset to I'm also a member of the team working for the agency, that ensured that our rates and our services and our pricing was fair enough to ensure that everyone on the project got paid a fair wage, yourself included.
Totally. Also, like, if you're up at night worried about how am I going to pay these bills or how am I going to do this, that, whatever, that takes you away from your capacity to be able to like show up fully and really be able to run your business in a full capacity. And so if you can do it, like absolutely, absolutely try to, pay yourself what you're worth. Like learning that worth, I think takes a long time and it's an ongoing sort of like evolution. But overall, especially if you've brought the business in and you are effectively creating jobs for other people, that in and of itself deserves compensation, honestly. So like, I think this is a really tough thing for a lot of founders to negotiate with themselves. I always say like, my boss is the worst. Like it's me. Surprise. So, like, definitely don't be shy about that. And I do think, we're very transparent, both internally with salary transparency, of course, and also around, the data in the database, but people understand. I think it's easy to justify take home pay for somebody who is bringing in business, managing the client relationship, putting their own name and their own brand on the line, and all the stress that comes with running the business overall. So it can be a lonely job. There are things that people will never quite understand. So that definitely deserves the compensation, and I wouldn't feel shy about that as much as you can, which of course is easier said than done.
Yes. But I think it's also like, as you said, as the owner of the agency, you take on so much more
Yeah.
than everyone. And even though I've grown a small team, at the end of the day, it's still my name on the line. And so the expectations for me when I walk into a meeting are different for members of my team. And that's the way that I want it, right? That's the way that it should be. But as a result of that, to your point, Rachel, if you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, if you're worried about how you're going to make the ends meet, then that's a stress that is going to go over into the other areas of the business. And so paying yourself a fair wage gives you the capacity to show up for your team, to show up for your clients, and to continue doing the work that you love. So yeah, don't ever be afraid to pay yourself what you're worth, or even just be a part of, treat yourself as that fourth or fifth person on the project.
Yeah.
And eke that out. The client doesn't need to know specifically what you're doing at all, right? You just need to provide them with that proposal.
Yeah, I think it's easier to separate yourself kind of emotionally from it, if like scope it as if you were going to bring another outside creative director in, and then assign it to yourself instead. I think that can also help, because it's so hard sometimes to like do that, introspection of like, well, what is my worth, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, if they were paying for a creative director, regardless whether it's you, that's this line at least to start with. And we're always we're always tougher on ourselves than we are on other people. So sometimes that can help just separate it yourself, like emotionally, so that you can really think more objectively and make sure that you are taking home what you would have paid somebody else if you had asked them to do the role.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got about 15 or so minutes. If folks have any more questions, you can totally feel free to throw those in the chat. Leticia, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, or if we should just do a little product walkthrough.
I think the product walkthrough is amazing. Let's bring it home for them.
Yeah. All right. So let me get this pulled up here. Okay. No one is allowed to judge my messy desktop. I'm like a screenshot monster. Okay. All right. So I'm sure you can all see this chaos. Okay. So some of this, I'm going to walk through a few things, some of the stuff that Leticia was mentioning in the presentation, specifically around budgeting and budget management. Just so everybody knows, there is this big library of scopes templates that Leticia had touched on earlier. This is, by the way, totally free to use, accessible, everything for anybody who isn't signed up for the platform today. And you can use these and configure these however you see fit. So these are fully built out. And then if I edit the template, this will help me create a new project. And then I can go ahead and configure this however I want. I'm going to jump into a project I already created, because we're going to talk a little bit more about like the budgeting tools. But there's a lot of other things that we can definitely dip into at potentially some of the other sessions. Okay, so in the Wethos platform, the way that we structured things is that each project, to your point earlier, is sort of its own little mini pod. That's a great term. So each project has three kind of core parts to it. You have a scope that you're managing, you have a budget that you're tracking against, and then you also have a payment side to it. What you're looking at right now is the scope of work. So this is a phase breakdown for my client. If I come in here and I'm in a project and I edit my scope, this is where I can reallocate or reassign budget against different roles. So this, funnily enough, actually started as a giant, crazy spreadsheet. And we were trying to figure out how to structure it in a way that would help us do what I'm about to show you. So really years in the making, I would say. So each service is configured in a specific way that it has a title, as you see here, and then it also has a role associated with it that we pre-assign. That just makes it easy to get a general budget breakdown, but you can always reassign this service to a different role if you want to reallocate. So on this view of it, you can see this is grouped by phase. So this is a phase breakdown for my client based on how I would actually, try to sell this in. And then I can toggle to group it by teammate. And what the system is going to do basically is it's going to reorganize all the same services in the scope into roles. So here's content strategist here. And then you can actually see how much each role breaks down to in terms of what they're going to get from a payment perspective. Leticia, I think you mentioned that you add sometimes an extra phase for the services and the markup and some of the things that go into that. So of course, people can do that. You can do that just by creating a new phase down here, and then you can add any services into that you want. Really quick, I'll show you how to reassign this. So if I flip to this team breakdown, I'm seeing this purple slice here as a content strategist. This is about 13,000. And then I'm seeing this like little awkward slice that's $900. And I'm like, who's doing that weird amount of work? So as I go down into my scope, I'm coming down through here and I see, there's one kind of rogue service assigned to a copywriter. A lot of times, maybe you want to combine these services into one role if somebody is, acting maybe as a strategist and a writer at the same time. So what I can do here is I'm going to reassign this to the brand strategist because my friend, brand strategist, whoever, is a really great copywriter as well. So when I reassign that service, this is going to actually reallocate that to the brand strategist role that's here. And then you'll see this $900 get added to their allocation of budget. And you'll also see that now reflected up here. No more random little sliver. This team only has to be whatever it is, 5 people instead of 6 people. So that's just a general look at the budgeting in terms of how you can think about it breaking down in sales. And then I do want to just show quickly, a lot of people don't know this little sneaky tab, but this manage tab actually is kind of like if project management and budget management had a baby. So this is actually where you can go ahead and invite people into roles, or you can assign a role to yourself like I've done here. So if you hover over any of these things, you'll see this little icon here. This is where I can invite a teammate to this role. So these are my go-tos, people that I work with often. And then if I do this little drop down here, you'll see all the services that are assigned to that role. Once the person accepts their invite, will then be assigned to that person. The great thing about this is that if Claire, let's say, has finished developing the social media content strategies, I can actually mark this service as complete. And this is going to help me track how much I owe Claire for work that she's completed to date. So that's right here. And then it's also going to help me track overall, for the overall scope of work, how much to bill the client for if I'm billing based on stuff that's already been completed. Billing cycles is a whole other thing we'll get into in other sessions, but people do it in all different ways, shapes, and forms. There's no right or wrong answer to it. From an accounting standpoint, the least risky thing you can do is bill your client based on something that's already been delivered so that there isn't that chance that they're going to turn around and be like, I'm not happy, I want my money back. And then, oops, I already maybe spent that money on the bills I had to pay over here. You can get into some hot water there. But there's a lot of other little bells and whistles here that you guys can explore. You can assign due dates to different services so you can actually visually see like what is due when. And then of course you can always edit the scope if things change. You can add new services to the scope, new roles to the scope, and you can always swap teammates out or resend invites, things of that nature if you want to. So for the creative director out there, if you assign any of the services in your scope to a creative director role, and then you invite yourself to that role here, you'll see all of those populated here, and you can actually track against work that you're doing as well as your teammates. Just so people know, we're going to be rolling out later down the line more detailed like permissions and collaboration around scopes and around what people can or can't see or edit. But for now, this will default so that if you invite a team member, they'll see what they're getting, their portion of the project. They'll see the services that are broken down across the rest of the project, but they won't see the individual dollar amount. So they won't necessarily see, they won't see what other people are earning. Of course, it's up to you if you want to actually disclose that information or not. But that's just what it defaults to for now, just to be better safe than sorry. This, talking about money is sensitive, and we're definitely cognizant of that. So that's a lot of the budgeting side of things. And I won't go into the payment side because we'll probably get into that later sessions, but a lot of other fun stuff to dig into there as well.
It's so good. I love the platform. It's so smooth. It's so smooth.
Thank you. We also just doubled our engineering capacity. So we're about to start shipping a bunch of updates, which will be awesome. And the load time stuff, we're aware of it. We're working on it. So we got a lot of really awesome new things shipping in the next couple of weeks.
That's really awesome. There is a question in the chat. Are you going to launch or start to integrate payroll tools?
Yeah, well, so I guess it depends on what you mean by payroll tools. Right now, you can invoice clients and get invoices paid, as well as you can send free peer-to-peer payments to each other. You have to set up a bank account within the platform in order to do that. In terms of payroll, specifically like salaried or W-2 employees, we're not dabbling too far into that because that gets into a lot of like complexities around state-by-state compliance. And just a lot of other things that are more, I guess, a JustWorks territory. But from a contractor perspective, if you're mainly functioning by hiring other people on sort of a project basis, all of the tools are here for you to be able to process those payments. And then you can, of course, keep track of all the transactions and pull those down into a spreadsheet. We're going to have a big push likely in the next quarter or two around third-party integrations. So we definitely hear y'all. We've got a big list of things like QuickBooks and other tools that we want to integrate with. So we're going to be deploying some of those things over the next few months, which hence the engineering capacity. So definitely going to do that.
Awesome. And then the next question up is from Ishan. And can I change the dollar to British sterling? So do you offer anything other than US dollar?
Oh, soon. Hopefully next year we will. Man, expanding internationally is something that we're like thinking a lot about. The currency, how the currency translates, how the markets change. That's the biggest, I would say, barrier, just in terms of like, we want to be really thoughtful before we start spitting out recommendations in like sterlings, for instance. So like not yet, but it's definitely something that is top of mind. And we get a lot of requests for different currencies, not only on the scoping tools, but also on the invoicing side as well. So hopefully that'll be something that we're able to roll out, in the next year. It's on the roadmap. That's what I can say.
Awesome. The next one is from Dan. Says they love the platform and curious to learn how you made the leap from art director to entrepreneur. And was Wethos completely self-funded or did you have investors? So a two-parter.
Yeah. So the first question, it's funny. Art school prepared me well for entrepreneurship because you just like do things over and over and over again, like sort of to the point of insanity sometimes. I always say there's like a fine line between insanity and creativity because you are a lot of times doing the same thing over and over again with the same results. So I would say art school definitely prepared me just for the kind of trial by fire nature. I went to Syracuse University actually, and I was in communications design there. So I did a good amount of entrepreneurship. I don't have the fanciest, like I've always been an entrepreneur story, but I will say that I made a lot of money selling hot dogs in college to drunk people. So that was a really lucrative business for me. And honestly, like I've been working since I was like 14. So I've always had to kind of find a scrappy way to get my bills paid and to, put money in my own pocket. And so hence kind of a business mindset, just in terms of really it comes down to like creative problem solving. And that's what I love about both, creativity and also entrepreneurship. I think that's a big strength. In terms of like how exactly I made the leap, I mean, I quit at 25. I just did it. I just took the leap. I saved up like 6 months of cash beforehand to pay my rent. Ran some numbers, did some like started the business up really while I was at my old agency. And
Didn't we
once, we
all?
got comfortable, yeah, yeah. Once we got comfortable enough, we just went ahead and did it. And it's not necessarily how everybody wants to go about it or approach it, which is totally understandable. But luckily, my parents were super supportive, just in that my mom had been an entrepreneur, and they were just, I guess, understanding. I don't necessarily come from a super wealthy background or anything, so I didn't, have a ton of support in a monetary perspective, but I had a lot of emotional support, and that counts for a lot, honestly, when you're going to call your parents at 25 and be like, I'm going to quit. Self-funded, or do we have investors? Both. We have both bootstrapped the business for the first year and a half. We raised a couple $1 million. Actually, that's a whole other story, where I didn't know the difference between an angel investor and a VC. And I read Corporate Finance for Dummies. I do not recommend that book. If you're gonna raise money, go read Venture Deals. I've read a lot of bad books. Venture Deals is probably the best one when it comes to investment, because it gets behind the psychology of these different investors and the types of funds and what is baiting them. So that was really helpful for me. But anyway, learned very much on the fly throughout that process. Took me a year to fundraise our first $1 million, which was the craziest thing I've ever done. My parents are still confused. As soon as that money is in, and then it's gone. We learned very quickly, how to manage a bigger budget that way. And then we went on to raise another couple million before we launched this product, really to build out our own product. We actually just closed an $8 million round of funding, which is, again, if you told me that 5 years ago, my jaw would have hit the ground. So that has really been going to expanding our engineering capacity so that we can ship features for y'all faster. And then next year, we'll be rolling out a lot of stuff, especially around mobile. Mobile scoping is going to be sick, and a bunch of other features surrounding the banking side, and also hopefully soon some other financing options for people. So that is the sort of long-winded answer to that. But I do have founder office hours. So if anybody is thinking about fundraising or ever wants to chat, shoot me a note, and I'm happy to grab some time.
Awesome. I love that your origin story includes selling hot dogs to drunk people.
In a hot dog suit. I got that was part of my cogs. I was like, all right, I'm running some numbers. I need a hot dog suit. $20 on Amazon. I'm gonna get 100 hot dogs at Costco for $5, people. It is a high margin business out there. And then you go out, you go to the party street, set up a grill. The cops did shut me down a few times, but usually they didn't get to me until I was like selling my very last few dogs. So
that is a great story.
They're like, this fucking girl again. I was like running around my girl, like, no, it's
fine. The myth of Rachel grows. Okay, hot dog vendor in her spare time. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good business right there.
Yes. So I think that's kind of it. Unless you guys have any more questions that you want to drop in the chat. We have our next session in 2 weeks. So this happening, 3 more left, happening every 2 weeks on Tuesdays at the same time. And each session builds on the last. So next session will really be going very deep into scoping and value-based, right? So if you haven't watched the first 2 sessions, highly recommend them. And see you next time.
Have a good night. And those sessions, FYI, are on our YouTube channel. We'll send a follow-up if anybody wants to do a recap and watch through those before the next one. But Leticia, thank you as always for the transparency and the time. This is awesome. So thank you. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Have a good one.